Yeah, as soon as he,
Is it recording? Yeah.
okay. Okay,
Yep, it started.
all right, here
Okay.
it is.
Good afternoon. I call this meeting to order for the Upper Rio Grande Flood Planning Group Subcommittee 2 meeting. Today is Tuesday, January the 18th. The time is 1:04 p.m. This Subcommittee 2 is Task 4B, identification of FMPs. So we'll go ahead and get started. Hope everyone was doing well, had a good break, had some good time off. Hope everyone stayed safe with COVID. Approval, can I get a motion for the approval of minutes for last month?
Also move.
Second.
Any opposed, any revisions? I hear none. Can I get a vote from the group to approve those minutes?
Aye.
Second.
We already got a second.
Yeah, all in favor, say aye.
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 And then I believe, that, thank you, Isela. So what we'll do is, just to make sure that we're, I don't know how this works, so we've got a new one for Richard to think about. Are proxies allowed to attend the meeting, Richard, or not?
If the person that they're the designated alternate for, typically, no, not really.
Okay, so then, Isela, how soon will you be at the office with your camera?
I'm parking, so just give me about 2 minutes. I'll run out there.
No, that's fine. I mean, we've got 3 and that'll be sufficient. Take your time. But I will ask if Enrique could drop off because then we're going to be over our 5 minutes.
When she gets on. Oh,
Okay.
she's on. Now
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So thank you for that. And just real quick,
So Enrique needs to drop.
yeah. So Chairman Acosta, we do have in attendance for our subcommittee, Gilbert Saldana, have Javier Acosta, we have Dave Hall, we have Jeff Bennett, and then we have Isela Dagnino, who will be joining us shortly, but we can still go into the presentation for the next agenda item because we do have more. And so let me move that over so you can see what the next agenda item is. And that'll be number 3.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
And Chris, we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Can you all hear me? Okay. Let me just share my screen here. 1 second. My phone is blocking my screen there. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oops, yes.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. We have a pretty full agenda, so we'll probably use up the full 2 hours, I'm guessing. We've got a lot to cover, and so hopefully y'all are able to attend the whole meeting. We will take a break after about a 1 hour mark. We might take about a 5-minute break. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So the meeting goal is to establish prioritization for evaluating all of the FMPs. When I say all of them, we've sort of been categorizing them into the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan, County Stormwater Master Plan, and the projects that are not in either the city or the Stormwater Master Plans for El Paso. so we're going to kind of look at them as a whole and evaluate, priority for studying those in detail. We're first going to start out by reviewing the FMP evaluation guidance and criteria. I know we had submitted some questions to Richard and had a phone conversation with him recently. So some of that is going to still be in flux, but we will do our best to kind of walk you through where we are right now, at least our current interpretation. Number 5, we're then going to jump in and talk about the City of El Paso or El Paso Water Stormwater Master Plan and how it has been refined since our last subcommittee meeting. We've had a separate meeting with Isela from EP Water, and we've cut down the list from the prioritized projects that were in the stormwater, that were in the tech memo that was recently submitted January 7th. So we've got a shorter list there. And then we're going to look at the level of effort that we think each one of these projects might take for the overall evaluation for the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan. Then we're going to do the same for the County Stormwater Master Plan. We're going to look at the overall refined list. There's been a couple minor adjustments, I think, since the last meeting and since the tech memo. So we're going to just take one more look at that, and then we're going to go through the level of effort we think it will take to address those projects. Finally, we'll look at the FMPs that are outside the city and county stormwater master plans. We'll spend a little bit more time going through those, kind of explaining each project, because they're pretty new, and we want to make sure that everyone kind of has a general sense of what those projects are all about, since they're not in a stormwater master plan that you can just look them up and read them. So we'll spend a little bit more time on that. Then we'll go through the qualitative scores that we had talked about in our overall process that was approved. We talked about giving scores for permitting that might be required, for reduction of flooding that we're expecting, to help us sort of prioritize those projects that are outside of stormwater master plans. We already prioritize the ones that are inside stormwater master plans. And then after that, we will look at the level of effort to address or evaluate each one of those that are outside the stormwater master plans. And then we're going to look at the overall budget, see how much budget we have remaining in this task for the evaluations. Then we're going to combine all 3 categories together: the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan, the El Paso County Stormwater Master Plan, and those that are outside Stormwater Master Plans. Put them all together and work in Excel to try to come up with an overall priority for evaluating those. So like I said, it's an action-packed day, and we appreciate you all attending today. After that sort of overall evaluation, we'll have some potential subcommittee recommendations for voting. Again, we're going to be voting on recommendations that we're going to make to the overall regional flood planning group. And we'll be asking you all if you approve the refinements to the list of the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan, the list of the El Paso County Stormwater Master Plans, and the overall order that we'll be putting together live as we're going through this meeting. Then lastly, we will just talk about next subcommittee 2 meeting dates. So any questions on the agenda? All right, we'll just jump right into it then. Again, the overall meeting goal is to establish prioritization for evaluating all of the FMPs. And we'll get into this in this next part right here, where we kind of dive into the details of what exactly are we doing, when we say we're evaluating these potentially feasible FMPs is what we're evaluating. And that's the first step before we come up with the overall recommendation. And then once we've come up with which ones of these potentially feasible FMPs we're going to recommend, the next step is scoring each one of those recommended FMPs in a manner consistent with the TWDB guidance. So that's kind of the overall process, but we're going to dive into a little bit more of the details here, and I'll try not to get too caught up in it, but I do want to kind of like I said, there's kind of a lot of technicalities here. There's going to be a lot of words on the page, and I'll do my best to summarize them. And it is going to be a little bit confusing, but you know, feel free to speak up if there's something that's not very clear. Overall, I just want to talk about our recent conversation with Richard Bagans about our assumption that we made at our last Subcommittee 3 meeting, where we talk about FMEs and FMSs. And we had voted within that subcommittee meeting that the subcommittee would like to include all of the city and county stormwater master plan projects as recommended projects in this regional flood plan, so that they would be eligible for any sort of funding opportunities that came up. And they wanted them to be included both as FMEs and FMSs. I'm sorry, FMEs and FMPs. That way, they would be in the plan for both studies and for construction. So our assumption there is that if they're in the plan as a recommended FME and a funding opportunity comes up through the state, then they could be awarded funding for further refinement of that alternative through an additional study, because they're in there as an FME. Now, if they're in there as an FMP, our assumption is that if a funding opportunity comes up in the state, then they can be awarded funding for construction. Now, that was one of the questions that we talked to Richard about, and we are waiting on some clarification from TWDB. But the way that we got there to that assumption, which I know we've talked about in some previous meetings, is this FMP flow chart from Exhibit C, Figure 5 of the Exhibit C is the technical guidance or guidelines that TWDB provided for the planning groups. And so you can see this overall flow chart. There is a what's highlighted here is that if we don't have sufficient data to include all the project details, then there is this option that says the RPG may consider recommending the project and leaving some of the project details blank. So that was going to be our approach. We didn't see anywhere in the guidelines that clearly stated, you know, which projects could be left blank. So that was another question that we brought up to Richard, and he gave us some feedback, and we're waiting to confirm that feedback, but we'll go through what he said there here in a couple slides. But this is another clip from the Exhibit C, Section 3.9, why we made this assumption, you know, that you could have it in there as an FMP, but just maybe leave certain fields blank that are very time consuming, like coming up with a benefit cost ratio, for example, based on some of this language that I've highlighted here. And I just wanted to use this opportunity because it said identified and recommended flood mitigation projects identified and recommended will be included in Texas's first ever state flood plan. But Richard, are you able to clarify if you know, if we identify a project but we don't end up recommending it, whether it's for an FMP, let's just say it's for an FMP, if it's not recommended but it is identified, would it still be eligible for construction funding, or does it have to be recommended?
Future state financial assistance is likely to be determined based on recommended FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs. That's how it's been with all the past water planning programs, is that it has to be one, identified, and two, recommended by the group. But again, that is, if that's an issue in the future, past when you guys have already submitted an adopted plan, the group can go ahead and submit an amendment to their regional plan if they choose to change an identified project to a recommended project.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And I guess that sort of leads into another question that I had. And sorry, while I'm just trying to pull up a schedule here that we got through an email, and this is related to those amendments that you're talking about. And I just wanted, and again, you know, this is in our list of questions that we sent out, but I was just curious if you're able to comment on the time frame for when you can submit these amendments, if there is a certain time at which you can no longer submit the amendments, because I did see this schedule and it looked like there was a general deadline, which would be somewhere in the ballpark of September 2023. It's in I guess between this period of September 2023 and August, September 2024, when the state flood plan comes out. Is it possible to submit amendments after that September 2023 or after the state flood plan comes out?
Yes, you can always submit amendments for the plan past those dates there, but that specific timeline is for ones that will be included in the state flood plan in 2024 before it's adopted and published. So that deadline to amend the 2023 RFP is mainly for the additional funding, the allocation of funding that we're going through the contract amendments for right now. But for these minor amendments, just switching FMEs to FMPs or identified projects to recommended projects, those are smaller ones that can happen anytime past until through the next cycle.
Great. Thank you. That's very helpful to clarify. So even after the state flood plan is published, you can still amend the plan.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have a question. This is Gisela. So anytime we have to amend the plan, we're gonna have to get the group together, or how does it work?
Yes. So in water planning, this has been done for a while, but yes, if it is because this group has power and you guys adopted the plan as is, let's say in 2023, you guys identified the list of recommended projects. And so if somebody comes in and project information changes, you guys have the power to say, well, is this actually still should it be just be an identified project, or do we want to recommend it? And so the full group, you guys will be having the next cycle. It's going to be extended over 5 years. So more likely 4 meetings a year. And so you will at one of those meetings likely vote to amend your regional plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Richard. That's very helpful. And just since we'd kind of talked about, okay, if we can't do it as both an FME and an FMS, say it has to be for FME and an FMP, say it has to be one or the other. And you'd mentioned that one of these minor amendments could be used to move it from the FME category to the FMP category, assuming that the proper study has been done and it would then qualify as an FMP. What do we know, like the general time frame for that amendment process?
I don't have so since this is first time for flood planning, that's still to be determined. But based on what I know of the water planning cycle, they have a minor amendments and major amendments, switching a couple things from identified to recommended, or FMP, a project from FME to FMP. Those are most likely considered minor amendments, and I think it's somewhere in the realm of 30 to 60 days. That's my best guess. I will definitely look up their, schedule and timeline and get back to you on that.
Thank you. And I apologize for putting you on the spot there. I just know that it's right now is kind of a time where, like I said, we're deciding which projects we're going to be evaluating, and it is also a decision-making point for some of our stakeholders and members to decide, well, if we know some of our projects aren't at that point where they can be considered FMPs, maybe they want to hire somebody to get that started, to squeeze them in, somewhere in this time frame. Maybe if they get it done, they can get in the draft regional flood plan or in the amended regional flood plan. So that's why I'm kind of pushing on these questions. I appreciate your answers.
In general, of what I'm seeing is if projects are looking to start in 2022, 2023, 2024, it would be a great idea to take a closer look at those to see if you want to recommend them. Again, I do not have any update when future state financial assistance will be available. But past that, when the state flood plan, you guys will be good into your next cycle where you can do those quick amendments if people are not ready to start until 2025 or later.
So Chris, are you clear on where we are on the projects being identified? The status of being identified? Do we have all the projects for the city and county in the identified category now?
Yes, for the city and county stormwater master plans. Well, if they're in the stormwater master plans, then yes.
Okay.
If
All right.
they are not in the stormwater master plans, then it's possible that there are some that, like we'll talk about today. There's a couple. There's one at least I know from the city that we found out about through some of our talks with the Fort Bliss in the U.S. Army there. So that one's not in the stormwater master plan, but we're going to make it one of these non-stormwater master plan projects. So it is possible there are others.
But all the ones that we listed in the original technical memorandum are now identified as FMPs. They aren't recommended yet, but they're identified.
Right. They're identified.
All right. So those can be converted at any time in the process to recommended, even if they don't get as part. This is relevant to today's talk. So if we don't identify them as ones that we can get the completed information needed to make them recommended, those can later on in the process, as things develop, they can be promoted, they can be changed to status of recommended if the data gets filled out, right? But that can happen anytime between now and the submission of the plan by the group. It doesn't need to be done right by this summer, for instance. I'm asking you, Chris, and Richard, whoever.
If I was hearing that correctly, for it to be included even in your draft plan as a recommended FMP, it definitely needs to have the required information in those tables.
So my question was more. Let me turn on my video so you can see who I am. So the question is if it's, they've all been identified, all the city and county projects. So if the city or county decides, after this initial draft goes out in August, that they would like one of the plans that's identified but not yet recommended because it was missing information. If they decided sometime after August, before the final plan's in, to go ahead and get the information assembled that's required to be recommended, they could do it after this August date of the draft plan, right? They have basically until 2023 in order to gather the information that's needed to make them eligible for recommendation.
Yes, though in terms of timing and logistics, I mean, but between you guys adopting by January 10th of 2023 next year, and then you guys are already submitting your amendment that summer in July or August of 2023, whenever the contract amendment is.
Yeah, I just didn't want there to be, an impression that based upon this meeting, the ones that we may not be able to get studied in the next 2 months, those can be retrieved if they, for whatever reason, the people that have an identified project, they can get that project studied and get its information filled in, and then they can get it. They still have time to get it in the project. It's not like all is lost if it doesn't get in the list we come up with today.
Correct. I mean, in general, just you don't want to be doing plan amendments every month or every 2 months. I mean, every 6 months or so. I mean, do it. You guys can do a refresh update or so.
Okay.
But yes, ongoing until the next plan is published in 2028 regional plan. You guys can do amendments to the 2023.
Right.
But the projects have to be identified already. It's not like it can be a project a new project that came up and hasn't been identified at all, or are we I guess limited to the projects that were identified on the list or on the master, in our case, in the master plan?
So my intuition is that you guys will be, even if it's not identified, if project details come about and the full group votes to amend the plan to include this unknown project, I believe it should be okay. That is to be determined, I will say, but that sounds like, again, when you think about project information, sometimes you don't know it today, right now, but in 2024, you might know of a project and that project might need funding. So you guys might need to do an amendment to the plan if the full group identifies it and recommends it. So I would generally say, no, you're not limited to just the ones you identify now.
All right, that helps. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, it's Dave. I got a question. I want to go back to what you said earlier about what group 3, subgroup 3 came up with. Can you add a little clarification on how that will affect what we're going to do today?
Yes, yeah, that's actually sort of baked into the next part of the presentation. So I'll touch on that as I'm jumping into that.
Okay, I'll wait for that. Okay.
All right. Okay, so I think, I guess the point I wanted to point out on this one is that, what we're doing today is to figure out what are we going to be recommending. We need to do some initial evaluations to then determine what we'll be recommending. And then there are some specific criteria that need to be filled out, additional evaluation, if you will, for just the recommended projects, which is task 5 of the scope of work. And we don't currently have approval to proceed with that task 5 at this point. So what are the general data that are required to
Hey, Chris?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
From what you said on group 3, didn't group 3 decide or suggest that everything that's identified be recommended? Isn't that what you said?
In a way, yes, because right now everything that we've identified, they said that they wanted it to be included as as a recommended FMP and as a recommended FME.
Okay, so
But
the process that we're talking about today to reduce the number of identified items that went ahead in the tech memo to recommended is OBE, overcome by events?
no, let me just interrupt for just a second here. So what's happened since that subcommittee 3 meeting is we've had this meeting with Richard, where there's been clarification. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just about to get into that. That's kind of the next question here. Sorry, Jeff, sorry to cut you off, but yes, that is right. We we were planning on submitting all the projects, because the ones that we didn't have budget or time to evaluate, they were going to go into the plan as just having these blank fields, like we pointed out here. It is acceptable to leave it blank, so that's the approach we were going to take. However, since our meeting, Subcommittee 3, one of the conversations I had with Richard over the phone was to determine, which fields can be left blank, because I mentioned that that's the approach that the subcommittee voted upon, and his response was that there's this table 13 in the guidance exhibit C guidance that has all of these fields, which you see here in the first 2 rows. And it also has these footnotes, which are highlighted in the bottom with red boxes. And he clarified that his understanding is that these fields, where these footnotes say they can be left blank, that's the only information that can be left blank. And so I've highlighted those in red. And as you can see, one of the ones that's really time consuming is the benefit cost ratio, which I've highlighted all the ones that are very time consuming for the evaluation with blue text. And the benefit cost ratio is one of those that is not called out in the footnote as you're able to leave it blank. So with that clarification, and again, we're waiting to hear back from some other folks at the TWDB. Richard has asked for a response for confirmation on that. But with that assumption, we are now kind of shifting our approach to, instead of including every identified project as a recommended project, in case the TWDB comes back and confirms exactly what Richard said, we have this backup plan where, which either way, that what we're going to talk about here today, we're going to have to do this evaluation anyways. But those that don't get evaluated, instead of being recommended as FMPs and FMEs, what we'll probably need to do is recommend them only as FMEs. So in other words, if we don't have the budget to go through this evaluation process we're talking about today, then they won't have the opportunity to be recommended as FMPs, but they will have the opportunity to be recommended as FMEs, or at the very minimum, identified as a potentially feasible project. So does that kind of answer your question, Dave?
So as I understand it, then we'll continue to do the process for reduction of numbers of city, county, and other regional, and to determine which ones will get evaluated or could be potentially evaluated by the contractor, depending on funding available. So we're going to continue that number reduction process that we talked about, and anything that's not included then will become an FME.
That is what I was going to recommend to the group, but ultimately it's up to you all. But that, because, with our talk with Richard, it was under the understanding that if you move a project from an FME to an FMP, that's considered a minor amendment. And it sounds like, even if it's a potentially feasible project and it's maybe not an FME, but it's potentially feasible, again, it could be shifted to the FMP category with most likely a minor amendment. So we haven't gone through and determined how many of the FMEs we can evaluate. Again, we're going to be limited on budget. There's a lot of projects in the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan, 96, I think, to be exact, and 76 in the county Stormwater Master Plan. So maybe if we don't have budget to include them all as FMEs, which are not FMPs, then maybe they stay as potentially infeasible or potentially feasible, which it sounds like you could still make that kind of move eventually through an amendment, through a minor amendment process.
Okay, I hear you. I thought we already narrowed the city down to 25 and the county down to 19.
Yeah, that's correct, roughly. We're going to take another look at that today, and we're going to take it to the next step.
Right, okay. And does that respectfully honor the vote that occurred in subgroup 3?
Not necessarily, because they wanted even the projects that are not in those prioritized groups. They wanted all of them included as recommended FMPs, and it looks like that might not be possible anymore.
Okay, so you guys will be responsible if we do something that doesn't honor what they voted, to go back to them and make sure they understand?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a follow-up subcommittee 3 meeting where we'll talk about, you know, whatever TWDB confirms as our understanding and gets confirmed as their understanding. We'll then kind of shift our plan, and then we'll talk about, well, how many FMEs can we evaluate? Kind of like today, we're going to talk about how many FMPs we can evaluate with budget. And whatever FMEs we can't evaluate, they'll just be potentially feasible projects that were identified.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. As I mentioned, I knew I was going to get into the details here, but they're very important. So thank you all for your patience and for following along with all these very minute, you know, very precise questions that we're having to ask, because it is very important. So so now what information do we use to recommend a project, right? And as Richard pointed out over the phone, you know, for the plan at this point, it looks like we're going to have to, for all potentially feasible projects, we are going to be looking at these categories and filling in these categories. The only ones that, you know, are, according to our current understanding, that can be left blank are those that are highlighted in red. And you know, just to point out, these two up here, you know, those are only can be left blank because if they have too many characters, like in the geo database. So but yeah, it's not many that can be left out. So we don't want to spend the time and the budget to go through all these different categories before we get to the recommendation process. We would like to see what are the most pertinent categories that can be used to figure out which ones we're going to recommend, and then afterwards we can go in and fill all these details out for every project. But in order to kind of streamline the process to get to which ones we're recommending, because that's going to take some time to start those evaluations as well, we would like to refer to the guidance, which has this list, table 23 in section 3.9b, and it says general project data required. And so this list is, I took all of these rows from this table right here, and I highlighted them in yellow where they are in this table. So, and then there are a few of those categories which were not in this table, which I've included in orange here at the bottom. So in summary, what we would like to do in order to figure out which projects we're going to recommend is come up with the information for all these yellow highlighted cells and these 4 orange cells that aren't part of this table 13. And with that information, we'll present it to you, and hopefully that'll be sufficient to make the decision whether a project should be recommended or not. And one other caveat, which I mentioned earlier, is that out of these projects, the ones that take the most level of effort to determine are those that I've highlighted with blue text here. And typically, those all have to do with hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. So we're going to talk about, you know, what does it take to model those projects here today. Any questions?
I wished I could read all that text, but I can't read any of that. It's all too small.
Yeah, I understand, and I apologize. I will be sending out a package after this. Well, this presentation was posted on the RFPG website on Saturday with the 3 days notice that's required. So it can be looked at there. We're also planning on taking the main points and project maps that we're going to be presenting and the projects that we're going to be talking about. We're going to put together a little package after this. It's going to have the Excel files that we're going to be working on. It's going to have all the main materials that we kind of established during the meeting today. And you all will have time to review that before the next general RFPG meeting, which by the way, Annette, I know that we were targeting that meeting for initially, I think it was going to be next week, but that wasn't going to work. Did we get any subcommittee, I'm sorry, general RPG results back from that poll? Whether it's going to be, I think we're then targeting the week of the 31st through the 4th, 31st through the 4th.
We have 8 members of the planning group who confirmed that February the 2nd at 9 a.m. would be the preferred date.
Okay, great. Well, we'll confirm that afterwards, but February 2nd at 9 a.m. sounds like the likely category. So, we'll be sure to send out that package by tomorrow. I don't think we'll get it out today, but by tomorrow, and that'll give exactly 2 weeks before the general RFPG meeting. So you all can review the materials in detail, and feel free to call us or reach out through email, however you would like. If there are any questions or concerns, or you find something that doesn't look right, we can explain that. And so there'll be sort of this buffer period before we actually vote on it in the general RFPG meeting, if everyone feels comfortable with that. And just a heads up at the end of this meeting, well, if everyone is comfortable, what we're planning on doing is having a vote to recommend whatever we're talking about today, these refinements, this overall list, to recommend it to the RFPG pending review of this package, and that there are no objections after review of this package. So that's kind of where we're heading at the end of today.
Hey, Chris, Dave, have you interacted with Gisela and Gilbert for El Paso and County on these yellow boxes and the orange boxes yet?
Not yet. This is the first. We have been in touch, but this is the first time that we are presenting these particular yellow boxes to anybody.
Okay, so that's part of what we have to do today.
Right. We'll talk about that.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, feel free, y'all, if there are any more questions, don't worry about it.
So we don't have to fill in the yellow boxes today. All we're going to do today is decide which projects we're going to fill in the yellow boxes for.
Right. We're going to talk about the level of effort associated with the yellow boxes. Okay. And this last point is, I kind of touched on it earlier, but this is sort of a preview for what's coming after we decide, after we go through the full evaluation of these yellow boxes and come up with our recommendations based on that information. Then, and also pending review of completeness of our tech memo that was submitted January 7th by TWDB. I believe they said within 30 days, they'll let us know if there are any incomplete sections, but if it's all complete, then we should receive the notice to proceed to task 5. And what that task 5 includes is for the recommended projects only, we need to go through the second level of evaluation, which includes all of these categories and kind of coming up with a score from 1 to 10 for each one of these categories based on, again, the guidance in Exhibit C. So I'm just gonna mention that as a highlight. We're not gonna spend a lot of time on that, but overall, this material, these scores are going to be used by the TWDB to rank all the recommended projects in the state flood plan. So I don't believe that they've finalized these criteria. Is that right, Richard? Is it possible that these categories and these scoring methods could still change, or is it just how you all are going to use the scores to come up with the overall ranking that is still to be determined?
Those particular ones identified, we may use all of them, we may use some of them as criteria for the rankings, and the specific details within each one of those categories is still in debate and can fluctuate. But we will not be adding, I don't think we are adding anything that's not identified already.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. All right, now with that, we'll get into the second part of this presentation, which is going to talk about the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan projects. This is the latest list of prioritized projects for evaluation. This is based on a follow-up meeting we had with Isela. There were 24 projects in the tech memo that was submitted January 7th, and that has been cut down to 14 projects just based on different reasons for sort of a case-by-case basis. But there are some projects that had such a small amount, it didn't seem like they would be likely to apply for funding, or maybe other projects that were being studied by others, or there was like a similar evaluation that was ongoing. There's several different reasons why some of these were cut down even further, but this is the latest list that we have here for the City of El Paso and EP Water Stormwater Master Plan. Are there any questions, or is there anything, Isela, that you would like to bring up concerning this?
No, I think we're good on this one.
Okay.
Chris, I will jump in real fast. I will state James is messaging me that on that criteria list, he is still saying that additional criteria may also happen.
Okay,
just based
that's
on
this list for recommended projects?
Yes, for that specific list.
Okay, thank you.
But again, it will be going through a public review and comment period. Or at least, sorry, by TWDB stakeholders, maybe not public.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So this next part of the presentation, we are going to be looking at the level of effort associated with the City of El Paso / EP Water Stormwater Master Plan prioritized projects. And you'll see that, and Jeff is going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. We're going to have to kind of move through fairly quickly to stay on schedule here, but in about 10 minutes or so, we can have a break. So maybe if we can get through this in 10 minutes, I don't know if that's a stretch, but we're going to talk about the top tier. We've kind of broken this down into different tiers based on the prioritization you see here. So we've got 14 projects, and we did this with the county stormwater master plan too. We're going to break it up into 3 tiers. So 14 divided by 3 is roughly 4 or 5. So you can see there's 5 projects in the first tier. We've got 5 projects in the second tier and 4 projects in the third tier. And again, those tiers are based on the prioritization that we received through coordination with EP Water. Now, within each tier, we've sorted those according to level of effort, making the easier ones higher in the ranking within each tier only. So within the first 5 projects, in other words, the top 5 prioritized projects by EP Water, we looked at the overall level of effort for evaluation, and we ranked them according to that, which you see in this far right-hand column. And we did the same thing for the second tier, and then we did the same thing for the third tier. And now, Jeff, and what we're trying to do to save time today, since we have so much to cover, is we want to talk to you about those 5 projects, and just in that first tier for now, rather than go through all the projects in this prioritized list, since those are available in the stormwater master plans. Y'all can look at those in more detail. We'll also include those in our package that we'll send out, but just for time's sake, to be efficient, we're just going to walk you through those first 5 projects and how we determined the level of effort in each of these categories, these 4 categories you see to the right. So any questions there with what we're going to take you through?
Is Gisela been involved in this tiering and in the prioritization within the tiers?
No,
No.
this is the first time that we've shown this to anybody. She was
Okay,
involved with this overall prioritization only.
Okay, so effectively what you did is took the top 5 on the list and prioritized them from easiest to complex?
Yes, in a way.
And
Yeah, I guess on semantics, like complexity is here in one column and level of effort
That's correct.
is over here in another column. But yeah, in general, it's based on level of effort.
Okay, and okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about the sort of the differences between complexity and level of effort. They're pretty similar, but there are some sort of refinements. So Jeff can kind of talk about that on this case by case basis, where he walks you through, you know.
It's kind of hard to see this chart because it wasn't included in the distribution.
Right. Yeah, and that's why we're handing out the package afterwards, because you know a lot of this was kind of in flux, and so we've that's why again we're not voting on anything firmly today. It's all going to be pending review of this in detail. We could have sent this out also, but it would be very it was subject to change, and at the same time it wouldn't, I don't think, make too much sense to anybody without the context we're going to give y'all, or we've given so far.
So as far as completion of the appropriate boxes, the yellow boxes and the orange boxes in accordance with the criteria chart that you gave us, the ones that are prioritized highest in each tier work well in that matrix where we have to fill in the boxes?
You mean the matrix that was included in the original materials?
Yeah, the one you showed us just a minute ago that had the orange bottom and
this one right
here, yellow
yeah.
boxes required for evaluation.
Yeah, so these categories that we use for level of effort, they're based on these blue text boxes here, which as I mentioned are the ones that require the most level of effort. And when I looked at each of those blue text boxes, what it came down to is they're all the ones that involve H&H modeling or cost estimation, right? The benefit cost ratio and the modeling results are what affect all of these blue boxes. And so that's why we've sort of scored them based on you know, how much effort it's going to take to refine the cost estimate, because that goes into the benefit cost ratio, which was the blue text, and the H&H modeling, how much effort's associated with that, because again, that goes in the benefit cost ratio, and then the benefit cost ratio itself. So those are the categories we use to score the overall level of effort.
So I'm probably way ahead on the question I'm asking in something you'll probably talk about in a minute, whatever. But when you get ready to cost relate to evaluations, does that mean that potentially only some things or items in the top tier will get evaluated?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're working towards. And again, this is sort of up for debate. And again, that's another reason why we, you know, didn't want to include everything in the initial materials, is because we're going to propose some approaches to that. And one of the approaches that we are going to propose, and again, it's up for debate to y'all, but is taking the top tier of each category and combining them all together. So it will be related to these tiers, but it's kind of hard to explain at this early point in the process. I think it'll make more sense once we get towards the end.
Okay, and the colors that are in the project complexity column there, green and yellow and red, those don't correlate to the priorities. Priority 1 is yellow. From what I can see, priority 2 is green. I can't
Right.
read the other numbers, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah, so one thing to clarify, and that's a good point, just to make clear, is that this SWMP priority is based again on this priority table from EP Water, and so that's what these numbers represent. They are not associated with the complexity of the project.
Ah, those came off of the other chart. Okay, all right. I got it.
And I know it's confusing, so please ask questions if you're not getting it. Thank you, Dave, for asking those questions. But again, the tiers were based on these prioritizations. So this is the first tier, the top 5 priority projects from EP Water. This is the second tier, and this is the third tier. So that's what these 3 boxes are here. And then they're kind of mixed up because then we resorted them based on this total level of effort score within each tier only.
So the red box means that it's too complex for us to address now? What is the red?
No. It's a general qualitative box that actually you'll see where it kind of fits in at the end of this presentation when we talk about, how much effort is it going to be to, how much cost might it take to evaluate some of these. And so these more complex ones will be related to the cost.
Okay, so those are related to evaluation cost. Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay.
So we haven't included those costs in here because we already have project costs and it's just confusing. So we'll get there. but keep them coming.
And Gisela, you're aware that if their evaluations are limited to tier 1, you're okay with that?
I don't think it's going to be limited to tier 1. I think where we're headed, which are the previews of coming attractions, we should get all the way through. Remember, tier 1 applies to all 3 of the things we're going to be evaluating today. There's the city projects, there's the county projects, and there's the ones that aren't on the stormwater master plan. So there's 3 different categories. We've got the tiers assigned to each one of them. So we should be able to get through the first tier for all 3 of those categories, and we should get well into the second tier. That's sort of a preview of where we're headed. But
okay.
But part of the reason for the interruptions in the beginning part of the meeting was to make clear that if we can't do all the data gathering that's required for a recommended project as part of the plan, you still have a prolonged period before the plan gets submitted. If you want to get the additional information you need, you have time to do it. So this isn't just because it's in the third tier doesn't mean that it can't be resurrected later on in the planning period, which is what what the early conversation was about.
So the way I see it, you guys are going to evaluate for the city, for the county, and other counties in our region. You're going to evaluate those in tier 1 first, and then you're going to move on to tier 2 for the entire region, and then to the third tier, right?
Right.
That's
that
what
way,
we are planning to propose. Yeah.
This is our proposal, but you all, this is our idea. You guys can do whatever you want to with it, but it seemed a way to spread the work out between the 3 different sources.
Okay, so
that's why I asked if you're satisfied with the numbers, with the amount of projects that are in tier 1.
So this is my other question, and I guess this one goes to Richard. So let's say we come up at the end of all this planning, we come up with 10 projects for our entire region. Okay, not only city, not only county of El Paso, but for the entire region, just to throw a number out there. Are these 10 projects going to compete with the rest of Texas for funds, or are we just competing within our region for funds? Because if we're competing with the rest of Texas, we're pretty much where we were without a regional master plan. That's the way I see it. So, and of course, I mean, we all want our projects to have a good chance, but we see that has not been the case most of the time. because here in El Paso, we don't have hurricanes, we don't have all these natural disasters that other regions have, right? So I just want to make sure that all the work, all the effort that we're putting here, all the time, because it's a lot of time on all of us, that it's going to be fruitful and it's not going to be in vain. So that's what I want to know. I want to make sure that all the time that we're all putting into this, it's going to be a benefit to our region.
Yes. So a bulk of the effort and eligibility for future state financial assistance comes from it having enough information, a project or a study to be identified as an FME, FMS, FMP, and getting it and having the entire group vote to recommend it in your regional plan. That is the biggest kind of hurdle to overcome. In terms of ranking it just for your region versus across the entire state, the flood planning process decided to we'll be taking project information that you guys submit in your adopted regional flood plan, taking that project information and ranking those projects across the entire state. Future financial state assistance will likely use that statewide project ranking as just one criteria for projects to fund projects. There are a lot of other criterias in terms of, for instance, water planning has the SWIFT funding program. For instance, like emergency need. I'm sorry, I don't know all the categories, but there are so many other categories that determine how urgent this project is, no matter where it is in Texas. And to my knowledge, I ran SWIFT for several seasons, I ran it for 3 years, and their project ranking to be honest, had very minimal effect on whether or not projects receive funding or not. All SWIFT funding projects, the first couple cycles, ended up being funded for those that were eligible and had all the complete information. The hurdle that is most important, emphasizing, is having enough information to put it in as a recommended FME, FMS, or FMP.
Now, I suppose the different regions have different scoring criteria. So how are we all going to, and I presume that there's, once we get all the projects together, there's going to be, for the entire state, there's going to be a different criteria that maybe, the different regions haven't thought of. So how are we going to be comparing apples to apples when we are competing for ranking statewide?
It's based on the project information that you guys supply. This little mini prioritization that you guys are doing now is based on the amount of time you guys have and the amount of funds you guys have to get the required information to be able to put into projects as an FMP, essentially. Once we have all of that objective data, then we can, once the statewide prioritization process is finalized, then it's comparing apples to apples because they're all running against that same criteria list on your screen now. So again, this little mini prioritization is just kind of hyper-focusing on what projects do you guys want to make sure that we have in the plans who will probably need funding very soon in the next couple of years, and that they need enough information to be included as an FMP, FMS, or FME in the plan.
But then you were also saying that this criteria on the screen right now, it may change, that there's gonna be there may be additional criteria added to it, right? Or did I misunderstand?
That is the official answer I am supposed to give, yes.
And just to clarify that what we're talking about today is not going through this evaluation process, but going through the preceding evaluation process, which is based on these yellow boxes. And that's to determine which projects get recommended. And based on which projects get recommended, then we go through this second evaluation process for scoring in each one of these categories, 1 through 10. And like Richard was saying, that this may change. There may be some additional categories. We don't have notice to proceed on this level of evaluation yet, but this is what the TWDB uses then to rank all of the projects throughout the state flood plan based on the same criteria you see here.
Yeah, this particular list will happen later in the plan.
Right, it's subject to change.
Yeah.
I think it's time for a break, Chris. You're after 3, after 2.
I'd say so. Is there any other questions before we break? Everyone okay with about a 5-minute break? It's 2:10 in El Paso, so maybe 2:15 Mountain Time. Is everyone okay coming back? All right. Thank you.
So Chris, this is Jeff. Can you call me?
Okay. Yeah.
Chris, you ready to start it up again?
Let's go ahead and start, Chris. It's already time.
All right, everybody back?
Everyone could turn on their cameras.
I think we're just missing Jeff
And Gilbert.
and Gilbert.
We still got 3,
Yeah.
so we still have a quorum.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
3 of 5.
All right, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff to share his screen so he can walk you through the first tier of the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan projects and his level of effort logic.
So we've only got about 45 minutes to get through 3 of these presentations, one of which is really long because we have to rank a series of projects. So I'm going to do this very quickly. We've looked at this thing a lot already, but basically I'll explain the columns in the table. And I've got this split screen with the projects that we're going to be discussing. On the left screen, we've got NW16, which is one of the, it's the top priority project in the list that we developed with EPW. So basically, the first column is the priority of the project within the Stormwater Master Plan. We then added in tiers, with the first 5 being tier 1, the next 5 being tier 2, the third 4 being tier 3. We have the name of the project in the master plan. We have a brief description. And then we have a coded set of complexity, how complex the project is in terms of getting the cost benefit ratio and the project costs. And with red being the most complex, yellow being middle, and green being the easiest to deal with. And then we took these categories at the top of the table. They're all taken from that flow chart, that matrix that Chris showed you. These are the blue items that we thought would take time to figure out. We're not going to spend any time on project cost refinement on the city projects because the costs are all in the current master plan. In fact, it's just being reissued as we speak. So those costs are not going to be revisited. And we made judgments on hydrologic modeling level of effort and hydraulic modeling level of effort. The hydraulic modeling effort is less for all the city projects than for many of the other projects, because we did all the hydrologic modeling to size these projects. We did not do detailed hydraulic modeling at the time these projects were done. We did back of the envelope type modeling, which will be superseded by the current modeling that's available in the area. So we're going to be using the more refined models for that. And then benefit cost ratio is a judgment. We basically, I looked at each one of these projects, and to just make the note that we as AECOM did the concept designs for all these projects, so we know these projects, so we're able to make some informed judgments on how complex they are and how much modeling is needed to be done. We've worked with all the initial models. So
Hey, Jeff,
yeah.
is this tier 1 priority 1?
These first, let me just.
No, are you looking at, are you addressing tier 1 priority 1 for the city?
I'm addressing tier 1 priority 1 for the city.
Okay, all right, good, go ahead.
So let me just shade the ones that I'm talking because I have to go over to the other side of the spreadsheet. So what we did is we looked at each one of these projects, and this is one. This is the first project. It's a improved channel in the northwestern part of the city. The second one is a channel in the eastern part of the city that's associated with a city up on the mesa, part of the city on the mesa. This is the second and third projects, or parts A and parts B of this project. The fourth one is an additional basin in the central eastern northeastern part of the city. And the fifth one that's high priority is first tier is associated with the America's dam system, America's 10 basin system, where this detention basin prevents flooding in a large mobile home area. So we went through and we made a judgment as to complexity. And we determined that out of the first 5, there was 1 that was more complex than the others, 2 that were relatively easy, and 2 that were somewhat in the middle. And when we sorted them, and this is what Chris showed you, we took within each tier, we sorted the project by the, as Dave said, between the least complex to the most complex. And then that jumbled up the priority. So the least complex, the one with the least level of effort is the one that was ranked second by the city. The next one was ranked 5th. The first one ranked 3rd, 3 and 4. It was just a matter of, we're going to do them in the order, we're recommending that we do them in the order of least to most, highest level of effort within each tier. So the goal is to get through all of the first tier and as many of the second tier as we can. And with that, does anybody have any questions about this? And I should say that if the city looks at this list and says, well, I don't think for whatever reason these 5 highest ranked projects in the master plan, the city thinks it's more important to do one of the projects in the second tier. That's a change that could be made. It's just up to the regional planning group to make that decision. Anybody have any questions about this, on how we did this? We did the same sort of study on the second tier and the third tier projects. If not, we can get on to the next discussion, which is the county projects.
Hey, Jeff, I have a question. I noticed that if you can scroll over a little bit to your right, I was noticing that the total, I think it's the total score, the total LOE, level of effort. I think those are, that one is just based on the addition of all the LOEs, I guess, to the left of those. If the bottom one was 14, why is it not like a, is that supposed to be colored?
Oh, I'm sorry, this should be, I hit a column and then didn't change it should be 11. This shouldn't change the, it doesn't change the result.
But I guess what I'm trying to understand is if the level, I guess I see a 14 that it seems like if it's the highest level of complexity, number 14.
Yes,
And it should, and I see that it's a color-coded yellow. Is that supposed to be like a red color-coded on column F?
The reason this one's different is that this one was not, this one is a project that we weren't involved in. So although it's not relatively, it's not that complex a project, it's one where we as AECOM didn't do the models. So we actually have to do more work on the benefit cost ratio than it's, I get your point. This should actually probably also be read because of that reason, but it's a simpler project. It's just, we are not that far along in our knowledge of that particular project. That's how that ended up like this.
Okay.
So, Chris and Jeff, let me ask you. So did you guys select 5 for the city, 5 for the county, 5 for the other counties, or how did you come up with breaking it up at 5?
We had,
So
we took a third of the number of projects. So the top third was first tier. I think the county had how many? Had
20.
20. So the top third was 7 or something.
Or they had
6.
21. They had 21.
So the top third was 7, and the ones outside the district, outside the stormwater master plans was what, Chris?
11.
Yeah, but not all of those are going to make it out of the starting gate. So I'd save that question for later on, Gisela. Keep in mind that we'll talk about this later. Any other question at this particular time? If not, we'll pass it on back to Chris to pass on for the county.
All right.
You have to take the screen back because okay.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so thanks, Jeff. The next one we're going to talk about is the county, unless there's any other questions about the city. And we did the same process. Now, this one, Jeff, we had you lead through those ones because he was very involved in that city stormwater master plan. And Clint Kimball from AECOM was the project manager. Well, actually, I'm sorry. He was the lead planner on the El Paso County stormwater master plan. Jeff was also very involved in that one, but Clint's probably the most familiar with that one. So I'm going to hand it off to him in just 1 second. Actually, I was going to make one note here, and that is, in discussing some of these levels of effort in the ranking that we've done. And Gilbert Saldana, I apologize, this was a pretty recent conversation we had, but it looks like, talking with Clint, that SSA 4 might be pending a lot of different moving parts, like the some new development. And Clint, maybe you want to chime in on our conversation, but it sounded like this project was maybe too much in flux at the point where it is in the county stormwater master plan. Like the conditions may have changed slightly, so we're considering moving that one down to the bottom of the list, even though it is the top priority. Clint, do you want to maybe just, before we hand it over to Gilbert Saldana and get your feedback, do you want to tell me, just explain what you're talking about at the moving pieces on this project?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Well, first, let me share my video. You can all see me. And I'll share my screen. Here's just a brief diagram of SSA 4. It's a basin. We do have a concept design and cost estimate for that, but there's also Rojas Drive, which is not shown in this aerial imagery, but there's an extension of a road being constructed and a piece of it which is currently under design that may pass directly through this project and make this concept infeasible. So this project the county was going to submit it for grant application through the flood infrastructure fund program, but decided not to just because of the uncertainty surrounding it. And Gilbert, you can correct me if I'm wrong or add anything to that if you know more than I do.
Hey, Clint, thank you for putting that in, or at least to bringing that up. You're right. I know the Rojas extension is gonna, I guess, traverse through there, and but I just wasn't sure that if it was something that we were in agreement to completely eliminate. I think it was just it would have to be modified somewhat, and so
Right.
Can we modify it as part of this evaluation? Just give it a, is it still the highest priority project for the county is the question. If it were modified to meet its goals, would it still be the highest priority county project? And that's a question for Gilbert.
I mean, it's still a high priority. It's just I'm just not sure after it gets modified with because I think the priority was based on a lot of it was based on a cost benefit ratio, and so I don't know if the modifications would drop it some in priority, but that's something I'd probably have to discuss it further with other county upper management and other folks from the county.
No, right. As far as I'm aware, that the design is still in progress, so we don't have the information required to know what that modification would be. But we could still include it with its current concept design and an asterisk, saying this project is still uncertain or may require some redesign.
Right. I agree. I mean, it'll definitely need a redesign. It's just I just don't know about just eliminating it completely.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Gilbert. And again, apologies. We couldn't coordinate with you in advance of this meeting. Like I said, this was kind of something that came up very recently. And just with that being said, what we would like to do just for our purposes today, we've made the assumption that it would kind of move from the first down to the bottom of the list and be priority 2021. But that is going to be pending your feedback, and so in other words, like Clint said, we'll sort of have an asterisk by this one that this could shift up in priority. It's just when we're jumping into the evaluation process, we didn't want to jump into that one as one of the first projects to evaluate, because it would be probably one of the first ones to evaluate if there's some incomplete information that could change the project substantially. So just for the rest of the sorting that we're going to go through today, we've assumed that that's the lowest priority on the still top 20 priority projects. It's still in the mix, but we're just assuming it's at the bottom of the list. And once we coordinate after the meeting, we can go back and run through the same process, move it up in the ranking based on our conversation. But just for the purposes of getting through the rest of the presentation, that's what we've assumed.
Okay, Chris, just let me ask you something real quick. Knowing that it's going to require at least some kind of a redesign, or would that kick it? Would that make it go into an FME rather than FMP?
Right. Yeah, because basically once we're getting through all the projects that we can in this evaluation process, any that we can't get to, we're going to recommend them as FMEs, and then we'll have a similar presentation like this in the subcommittee 3, which focuses on FMEs and FMSs, and then we'll go through how much budget we have to rank or to evaluate the FMEs. But yeah, that's the first sort of bucket that it goes into if we can't evaluate it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
So the list that's going to be evaluated here goes through number 8 then? As top tier? Since number 1's removed?
Right. It would go through, well, it's basically just a re-ranking of this. So you can see that number 1 is at the bottom of this list. It's in tier 3 here.
Yeah, so 2 through 8 would be the top 7.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, all right.
All right, Clint, do you want to take them through the rest of the county projects?
Sure. The rest of the county is pretty straightforward. There isn't as much variation in level of effort as there is in the city or EP water stormwater master plan. And the reason for that is because for the county has already completed hydrologic and hydraulic modeling for all of these alternatives and a partial benefit cost analysis. So a lot of the work has already been done. The work required to get it over the last hurdle would mostly be things like changing the format, because the format they use for a benefit cost analysis for the flood infrastructure fund is not the same as the format required by the state, but that wouldn't vary by project. They would all be the same. There'd be some work in adding a few other benefits, such as lost productivity, which doesn't vary much by project. The big thing that's going to cause a variation in level of effort is going to be assessing roadway damages, or in other words, roadway benefits for completing the project. And that was not done by the county because it was too much of a level of effort and would cost too much. So they left it out, knowing that it'd be something that they would need to evaluate in the future. So some of these projects impact a lot more roadways than others, or benefit a lot more roadways. And so they would require significant more effort. So that's what the variation is. Scrolling through some of these projects, the next highest one on the list, number 2, is CAN1, which is primarily constructing new lined concrete improvements in the lower portion of a channel that currently has sediment deposition issues and thus is too small. It would cause spillage of floodwaters into adjacent neighborhoods, and there's a lot of roadways there. So that's why this one would require a fair amount of effort, as all those different roadways would need to be evaluated for what those damages would be. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. The next one is VIN6, which is a culvert replacement, not VIN5. These figures are directly from the county stormwater master plan, so they include other projects which are not on this tier 1 list. But VIN6 is just an undersized culvert, would need to be enlarged. Actually, it would be a fairly simple evaluation for that because it would basically only impact one roadway, small level of effort. SSA2, which is an embankment adjacent to SSA1, which is already being funded outside of the state plan. But SSA2 would benefit a large area, but that area doesn't include a lot of roadways. So it would be relatively easy to do an evaluation there. MON3 is a dam or a pair of dams, really, to create one new pond. This is up in the northeastern quadrant of the county, where it seems like there aren't many houses, but if you go downstream, there is actually a significant sized neighborhood called Homestead Meadows, which is relatively flat, and the floodplain that these dams would benefit spreads out shallow but over a wide area. So it impacts many roads, many houses. That highest possible level of effort exists for studying this one. HAC2, I believe. No, is it HAC1? Let's see if I have my list handy. HAC3. My bad. HAC3 is a short embankment, relatively small pond, captures a small watershed, benefits an area that is largely agricultural, but some roadways. This one was a medium effort. And FAB1, which is it's a special little problem down near Fabens, where there's an existing basin that's basically washed out, and it's the only protection that this neighborhood has for this entire arroyo. Just discharges flood water directly into the neighborhood, so that needs to be fixed up in various ways. Small project, but because of the impacts, a medium level of effort to evaluate the benefits. I believe that's project 7. I don't actually have project number 8 on my list here. But let's see, CAN2, as I recall, was a very complex project. Includes two new retention basins, plus a channel improvement. So it's a complex project and would require almost the highest level of effort to evaluate that one, but not quite as high as that Montana Sector 1 in the Northeast Quadrant, but still pretty high. But again, the variation isn't much. We're talking about, whereas for the city stormwater master plan, it varied from 1 to 10. These ones generally just from 3 to 6, just to keep it as close as apples to apples as we can. So, any questions? Chris, did I sum that up about right?
Yeah, thank you. Any questions on what Clint was talking about? Let me just go back to sharing my screen for a second. So this is sort of where the ranking landed for the county projects. As we mentioned, the top 7 prioritized projects minus, well, assuming that we could move this number 1 down to the bottom of the list, again with an asterisk by it. That's why it's highlighted. If we move forward with that approach, those would be the 7 projects that would be in top tier 1, and this would be again within each tier we've sorted it from lowest to highest according to the total level of effort. So if there aren't any questions, I'm sorry, I'm not sharing. I'm sharing that was a sneak preview of the. Yeah, no, that was right. That's the right table. Sorry, I got confused for a second. So if there aren't any questions with that, Gilbert Saldana, any questions? I know from the county.
I do actually have a couple of things. I know, like I think earlier Gisela was asking about, how did we end up with the tiering or the number of tiers, and you explained it was into 3s, I guess, equally divided. And I know that we came down to about 20 projects. And I also, but I guess is that I guess I just want to be fair to the region, and I want to make sure that the tiers get equally distributed throughout the region. And is that something that we would I guess we would look at reevaluate later on? I mean, or is this because?
Yeah. No, so this is just a method that we came up with. It is flexible, and we can modify it if the subcommittee, and eventually the RFPG, would like to go with another approach. If you wanted to, instead of doing it by thirds of the overall list, because you're right, the county does have the most number of projects, prioritized projects. We could do it by an equal number. We could do it by 5s, so that there's 5 projects in each tier, and then just the county would have more tiers, I guess. And then, so that's another way of doing it. It's open for debate, and we don't have to decide right now. Like I said, you all will, it's a lot of information, and we're going to hand out these packages. So if there's another approach that you want to bring up at the general RFPG meeting, or, beforehand, reach out to us, call us, and we can even set up sort of a side meeting. We won't have a quorum, but if we need to coordinate, we can do that separately if on another approach. Okay.
And then I think the other thing that I wanted to touch on was, I think SSA 2, which is one that you just touched on. I think that's one that we may want to drop to one of the lower tiers, because I think that's the site where the new Amazon project came in and did the development and took care of a lot of that drainage issues that was happening from that undeveloped land at that time. So just something that wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful to know. So you would think maybe drop it to the bottom of the list like we did for SSA 4, or be underneath SSA 4. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably drop it to the very bottom. Yes.
Okay.
That would be logical to include the top tier through number 9 then.
Yeah,
Right.
and like I said, I mean, I'm okay if we end up going possibly, like you said earlier, or we can talk about it, but you know, I think we could possibly even do like a top 5 would be the top, you know, tier 1 or something like that. And we just have a larger tier 3 if necessary, but we can discuss that later on, like you suggested, Chris.
Okay, great. We will discuss that, and for the purposes of the rest of this meeting, we'll assume, you know, the same order and without that change with SSA 2. But yeah, we can talk about that possible change.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. So with that, I will move into the projects that are not part of the stormwater master plans. So these are there were 9 in the tech memo. We've moved 2 of them into this list because after we found out that what the top priorities were for the county, there was one project from the county stormwater master plan, SOC 4, which was not in that list. And we know that it's a maybe even the top priority for EPC WID number 1. It was one of the projects that makes a big difference for them. So we have added it to this list of non-stormwater master plan projects, even though it is in the stormwater master plan. But that's we thought it kind of fit in better here since it wasn't prioritized for the county. And then the second one that we've added to this list since the tech memo is the excavation of the Fort Bliss sump. Actually, I think this one is in the tech memo. No, it's not. It's not because it doesn't have a raking. So that's why we have NA here. It's not. It doesn't have an FMP ID, but it is one that we found out about through discussions with U.S. Army and EP Water, where it was a project that a long time ago was a big priority for EP Water, but then it got held up in the jurisdictional waters, delineating wetlands, and just so happened that the U.S. Army brought up in our conversation about a separate project that you know, they just finished the wetland delineation for that. So now it seems like a feasible project. It wasn't in the city stormwater master plan, so we've added it to this overall list. Any questions about those 2 changes? And we know, by the way, Isela pointed out that this cost is wrong. It's going to be low, and that's based on, you know, some report that we had received that we thought it was the full excavation process, but or project, but it was actually, it seems to be just a piece of it, or even maybe a separate project. So we can ignore this cost. Basically, I don't believe we have a cost for this project yet. Is that right, Isela?
That's right.
Okay, so there's no cost here. And the other things I want to point out was that this cost was not in the tech memo because it's sort of up for debate. This TxDOT project has 163 low water crossings and 9 other crossings that aren't considered low water crossings. And they provided in the study, actually it's an AECOM study for TxDOT, that what it would take, they've prioritized all these low water crossings. This is on the road in Presidio County between Presidio and Candelaria on FM 170. It runs along the Rio Grande. There are a lot of low water crossings. So they prioritized, you know, which ones are the highest priority out of these 163. And they've developed costs for if you were to upgrade them all to the 5-year level of service or to the 10-year level of service. Since we do have a goal of removing a certain number of low water crossings, I believe it's like 40% from the 10% annual chance flood. I assumed this is how much it would take to remove all of them from the 10-year to get all of them up to the 10-year level of service. It's a very big number. Actually, I feel like there's a extra 0 missing from there, but or more. But this cost is kind of in flux, and I think we'll need a separate meeting to kind of talk about, you know, which ones we prioritize out of this list. But we definitely can't do all of them. So that's another change I want to talk about. And then this El Paso Water is another stakeholder in this Riverside regulating reservoir. I believe they're splitting the costs with EPC WID number 1, which I wasn't aware of when the tech memo came out, but I've sort of added them as another potential sponsor to this project, in addition to EPC WID number 1. Now we're getting close to the 10-minute marker. We have a couple options 10 minutes before this thing ends. I wanted to get through explaining each of these projects, a kind of general overview of what they're all about and how much we know, how much we don't know. And then I was going to walk you through this evaluation, which, if you recall, we voted on the process to identify potentially feasible FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs. And for FMPs outside of the stormwater master plans, it involved coming up with scores related to these different categories that were agreed upon, and the total number of points for each of these categories were agreed upon by the subcommittee 2, our last subcommittee 2 meeting. So we've gone through and scored them. A lot of it is judgment based, so I've kept a lot of these as highlights, and I wanted to kind of walk through that's basically what I use to prioritize this list. So based on these overall scores, I've resorted them, and this would be the new sort of prioritized list of non-stormwater master plan projects. The other pieces of the presentation that I guess we might not get to are, this is the level of effort associated with the non-stormwater master plans projects. So what Jeff and Clint just walked you through, I did the same process for the projects outside of the stormwater master plans. And these are sort of the tiers that were based on the priority that came out of this scoring process. And so then again, within each tier, we sorted them according to level of effort. And lastly, we were going to, well, not lastly, but we were going to talk about how much budget remains. We basically have about 175K left in this task, and we do still need to consider the contract amendment for 600,000. So that could change, but we could just skip to the chase and look at what we think it's going to cost, or how many we think that we can get through. But we still need to leave time for potential vote, and then to discuss the next subcommittee meeting. So,
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Chris, where do items 6, 7, 8, and 9 appear in your new priority? Can you show me where they appear?
When you say 6, 7, 8, 9, are you referring
They're the ones that are for Presidio and Hudspeth. Where do they appear in the matrix that you showed me, your reeval matrix that you put together? Where do they appear in the tiers? 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I apologize. I don't have the FMP IDs on here, but they would be.
6 is the low water crossings.
Yeah. So 6 is number 4.
So it's in tier 1.
Yeah, it is in tier 1. The top 4 in tier 1. And
okay, where's 7, 8, 9?
7 is ranked number 7.
Okay,
9,
in tier 2?
Yes. 9 is ranked number 5, so it's also in tier 2.
Okay.
And 8 is at the bottom of the list in tier 3.
Okay. I think it's extremely important that we pay attention to getting work done in the evaluation process for areas away from El Paso.
Right.
If we don't, we're going to lose the region. So, we need to, the fact that you've got 2 of those up in tier 1 helps a lot.
I think that we should reevaluate and maybe just do the top 5 for all in tier 1 and then the next 5 and then the following 5. Because I think if we do this, we're able to bring one up into tier 1 as well. One of the Hudspeth, I think, back into tier 1.
So tier 1 for other than County of El Paso and City would be the top 5?
So I think just all across, just the top 5 would be tier 1, and then tier 2 would be the next 5, and tier 3, the rest.
Okay, what you're saying is tier 1 would be top 5 for all 3 areas?
I think so.
I agree.
And that would put 2 of those projects that are outside of the County of El Paso in the
tier
first
1.
tier, in tier 1.
Yeah, we need to really pay attention to that to keep the region involved.
I agree with you.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Do we want to, I think it makes sense then for us to kind of go back to the drawing board, and we'll coordinate with Gilbert on those 2 moving projects in his list, and we will resort it, redo the tiers by every 5 projects. Basically, will be a new tier. It won't be according to thirds like we have it now, and then we can reconvene and vote, and then we'll go to the next steps on that. Does that sound like a good plan for everyone?
I also suggest that if we're going to proceed to tier 2 for evaluation in any areas, that we take a look at the regional items that are in tier 2 first, and then look at tier 2 items for city and county.
Okay, so whenever we're starting with the second tier of the overall list, we're going to go through and use the top ranked or according to level of effort from outside of El Paso County, and those will be the top ones, the top 5, before we get to alternating between the city and the county. Am I understanding that correctly?
I just think there needs to be prioritization to address regional issues, yeah. And if it may not be all of the tier 2 that are there may only be 2 items in tier 2 that need to be picked up before city and county. But yes, you earlier said that you think you can easily get into tier 2 in city and county in many cases, so there should be plenty of room for that.
So I'm not sure that's what Dave said, that basically we were going to do all the ones in tier 3 from the region before we even start looking at the city and county ones. Is that what you just said, Chris?
When we get to tier 2, we would start out the tier 2 group, instead of alternating, between city, county, tier non-stormwater master plan, city, county, non-stormwater master plan. Basically, just do. And this is a part we haven't really decided yet. We have a couple different options here, but sounds like Dave is suggesting we don't alternate once we get to tier 2, and we just knock out all of tier 2 for non-stormwater master plan projects first, and then we alternate the rest of tier 2 between the city and county stormwater master plans.
I don't necessarily mean all of tier 2 for others. I just think we need to look at tier 2 first in other than city and county, and maybe there'll be only 2 items there that might be viable, or maybe we pick up because we need to pay attention to the region. There are going to be at least 5 items in tier 2 on the other, so maybe 2 of them, and then you look at start working on tier 2's high priorities for city and county.
So I guess we would need to see how many projects you're going to be able to get through. Which earlier you said we may be able to get through to all of tier 1, of course, and then all of tier 2 and maybe tier 3. If that's the case, then I think we'll be fine. But if we're limited in funds, then we have to look at it. We definitely have to get to look at other areas, areas outside of the El Paso County, city and county, so that they don't feel like we're pushing them aside or we're not paying attention to those areas.
So So Dave, one thing that I'm not sure you're aware of, it was discussed in Subcommittee 3, is because we haven't gotten any feedback despite a lot of effort trying to contact the stakeholders that are in the broader region, we have done the modeling to identify the areas that have the highest flood risk within the broader region. So, for instance, we took out the top 20 cities and tabulated the number of residences that were at risk across the broader region per the flood modeling. So we've created FMEs for, I think, something like 15 to 20 cities in the broader region, which we think will feed ultimately into having FMPs for the broader region. Now, we obviously need to have concurrence by those cities that we submit FMEs for, but we've basically taken the initiative to basically get the issues identified so that we can get the attention of the cities that, at least per our analyses, need the help. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think you have an excellent opportunity if we do give some level of priority to those other than El Paso City and County in the presentations in Presidio and Pecos.
Right.
You may motivate more responses as a result of that too.
Right. So we're going to have, whatever the ranking method for the FMEs, we're going to propose that there be a way to make sure that FMEs for that broader region get identified. The basic problem with the dearth of FMPs is that we're not getting the response of projects which at least have a concept design that we can include as an FMP in the plan. So we're basically jump-starting the process to prod them to give us FMEs in that broader region.
Yeah, again, I think you have an excellent opportunity, though, to demonstrate a goodness, if you want to call it that, to favor focus on areas outside this area in those two presentations in Pecos and Presidio, and maybe get some really good responses out of them.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment, and obviously, however things end up looking after we take that approach, everyone will be very interested to see, how many we think we can get into, which ones can get done, which ones can't get done. So what I would suggest is that we, try to meet again in about a week. I know that we have to, send out an agenda at least 7 days in advance. But if and it sounded like, we were targeting the 2nd of February for the next RFPG meeting, so if we can meet a week from tomorrow, assuming we get the agenda out for this, we meet on Wednesday, the 26th, we could potentially, send out some materials after this meeting with different approaches. And we will consider the five projects in each tier, and then when we combine them all together, we can maybe provide 3 different alternates and alternate approaches. And one of those alternate approaches will be, once we get to tier 2, prioritizing the ones outside of the county altogether as the first priority of the tier 2 projects, and then alternating between the city and county after that. Does that sound like a plan? We'll send out those materials so y'all can review those approaches, and then we'll talk about it in the next subcommittee meeting, maybe on the 26th.
Can we do it on the 27th instead, Chris?
I'm okay with that.
I'm out of town, and I would like to participate if I can. Now, it's okay if you guys go and hold it, without me, but if we can do it 27, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I think as long as we get it done before the next RFPG meeting, that would be ideal, so we can vote potentially on at that RFPG meeting.
Do you need a vote here? Approval of the refinements and list of priorities projects for El Paso City for county and other? I mean, we can make a motion here to say 5 in tier 1 for each one and vote on that if you want to.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. If we could get through those 2 votes, and then this third one I'm adding is approval of the creation of tiers. Creation of tiers.
Well, in the refinements list of priorities project for the city, are we saying 14? We're voting on 14 for the city and 20 for the county? Or are we voting the tier 1?
We are voting for just the 14 being the top prioritized projects for the city. So basically what you see on this page right here. Okay,
and then for the county is 20?
For the county it is 20, but since some of these are going to be shifting, like we talked about SSA 4 and moving down SSA 2, maybe we should hold off on the county one until we've had a chance to coordinate with Gilbert, and then we can vote on the county one at the next meeting. Does that sound okay?
So why can't we just vote on all of them at the next meeting? Or
yeah, we could do that as well.
Would that be easier, or? No,
I just want to keep things moving for Chris.
No, that's fine, Isela. That we can vote on your prioritization of the next one if you would prefer to wait, and maybe we just vote on approval of creation of tiers according to 5 projects in each category, and we'll just say multiple methods will be presented for combining the overall list of projects for evaluation. Well, I guess we don't need to vote on that. I think we just get away with voting on the approval of creation of tiers according to 5 projects in each category. What do y'all think?
I think so, and then we can just vote on the rest next week or whenever we meet next week before we meet with the entire group.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to approve the creation of tiers according 5 projects in each category.
Approve.
How about a second?
Second.
In favor?
So Gilbert, David Gilbert.
Yeah, I think Gilbert seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
All right.
None opposed, the motion's approved.
All right. And I think we've already talked about the next meeting, but we'll aim for the 27th. Does that work for everybody? Thursday?
You want to do 1300 again?
Yeah, that works for me. Let me just double check.
Does that work for you?
I can, you know what? Can we do 2 o'clock? I have a 1 to 2 meeting already scheduled on that day. I can either do 10:30 on or 2 and on.
2 p.m. works for me as well.
Yeah, 2 works fine.
So 1400, 2 o'clock. Okay.
And that's Mountain Time. All right. Well,
is that going to be another 2 hours?
I think we'll schedule it for 2 hours just to be safe. But I think we'll likely get through it closer to an hour, unless there's a lot of discussion.
All right.
Do you expect another one after that one, or will that one generally finish up things for you, Chris?
I think that'll get us what we need to vote on at the next general RFPG meeting, and then we'll have what we're really aiming to get is the approval to start the evaluation process that we talked about earlier today. So if we can, if we can get through those votes on this overall ranking next Thursday, I think that'll be what we need to start the evaluation process after the overall group, agrees.
Does that give us enough time before the 2 February meeting to get things out correctly to meet criteria?
Let's see, so.
27th would be 28, 29, 30, 31.
No, well,
1,
we
2.
just have to. We would, that's why they suggested the 26th, because
That's only 6 days, yeah. Well, you guys have the meeting on the 26th. That's fine. If you still can have a quorum.
Do we, Chris, can we post the agenda on the 26th with wording that's going to be sufficient for the February 2nd meeting, or it has to wait until we're done with the subcommittee 2 meeting?
No, that's what I was going to suggest is we can post the agenda on the 26th and we'll just we'll leave it, say something more general like vote on the whatever's agreed upon at the next subcommittee 2 meeting, or the subcommittee 2 meeting to take place on the 27th, pending that vote takes place or something along those lines. I think if we can keep it general in the agenda, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay,
So that does give us
Yeah.
enough time. Okay.
we'll be okay then.
Well, thanks for doing it 27th. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you guys. And sorry we went a little bit long. The discussion at the beginning took a little bit more time than we were anticipating, but we are very grateful that you were able to answer some of those questions, Richard. That really helps us out a lot. Just to, we know that some of it is still pending. We'll wait for some of the email confirmations to our questions to TWDB, but we really appreciate everyone's time, and just connect on the 27th. Unless there's anything else, I'll hand it back to
Just for
Ned
the
or
minutes.
Javier.
Just for the minutes, I think we need to say that we tabled 12A and 12B as a result of, we just needed more discussion before we could do those votes until the next meeting.
Would you say that one?
And it just says it in, so since we called for a vote in 12A and 12B, we're going to table 12A and 12B for the next subcommittee 2 meeting.
Okay.
It's also called for,
Okay.
Okay.
And then, do you want to entertain a motion?
Yes, if I could get a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
A second.
Because we have another 2-hour meeting to go to, right, Gil?
Exactly.
Hey, we're doing a good job.
We are. It was a very good
Yeah.
meeting.
Who seconded?
Nobody yet.
Nobody.
Second.
Okay, Dave.
All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank
Bye,
you. Good
everybody.
meeting, everyone.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Chris, you're going to need a really good idea of how many you're going to be able to evaluate once we do this next meeting.
Yes.
Understood.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.